again, everybody. We've been working a lot with Sketchup and learning how it works and building some 3D models. It's all a real exciting program, especially for something that you get for free. One of the best things about Sketchup, with it being free and being able to do all these cool 3D building projects, is you can take these projects, for example, this shape that I built here, and go and print them out on a 3D printer. You have to jump through a few hoops to get there, but once you have the proper software and just a little bit of knowledge of how to import and export files, you can quickly have this ready to print on a 3D printer. The files and the methods I'm going to talk about, I know work at least for MakerBot 3D printers. I haven't ever worked with any other brand before, but I know a lot of them should understand similar files. Like really our ultimate goal here is to get to an STL file, and that seems to be a fairly universal file that 3D printers use or can understand. I know when you work in Tinkercad, a website that lets you build 3D shapes online, within a web browser, they export to STL also. So it seems to be a fairly common one. But it's always, with 3D printing, it's always trial and error and doing a little bit of research to find the right thing that works best for you. So I'm going to take this shape that I made. You notice I have it in Sketchup here. Just going to show you, this is actually a smaller shape. I think this is only 2 3/4 inch tall. I think it's a 4 by 4 inch base. So this is something that could fit into a 3D printer. That's one of the first considerations, is make sure the shapes that you're building will fit. A lot of times Sketchup starts you about here, and your students will just start drawing only to realize that the house they built or the cell phone stand they made is 4 feet tall in real life. You can usually scale that down, but it's good to get all your measurements right here in SketchUp, especially if you're building a project that's meant to fit together, because once you build it all here and get it to the other program and you have to scale it down, if you had a project where measurements are important, it won't keep those measurements true in the other programs that are prepping for it. But SketchUp has all of the measurement programs, so you want to get your measurements right here. So I'm going to go ahead and take this file. SketchUp saves by default as an SKP. That's just a SketchUp file. Just throw this on my desktop. Call it test here. I'm saving that just to save this, but we don't want to leave with an SKP file. We don't want to leave SketchUp with an SKP. We want to leave SketchUp with what's called, I'm going to come down here to export 3D model, a collada file, this .dae. Another program called MeshLab understands these, and this can continue to help us along the way. Unfortunately, the MakerBot software and other slicer programs that actually build the file that the 3D printer will understand don't understand colladas. So I'm going to go ahead and export this as that. I'm throwing these on my desktop. I'm just going to minimize here. You notice here's my SKP and here is my collada. So I'm going to open this, go to MeshLab. This is another free piece of software, and it doesn't seem like you can do much building in here. I've never actually played with it very much. I just used it for the purpose of changing files. It seems to do that pretty well. So I'm going to import a mesh. Look for my collada here, my DAE. It understands that. You'll notice this will kind of help you if you're working with other 3D printers that you need to change into different files. Programs will typically gray out files they don't understand, but the files they do understand will be in this full black text. So that can help you kind of get to the file that you need. I'm going to go ahead and hit OK on all of these. Just kind of give my model a look over. This is a good place to kind of make sure all your faces are facing outwards. If not, one of these will be like, if your face is facing the wrong direction, it'll be black. I'm going to cover a lot of those things, little errors to watch out for in a different video. But this is another good place to check those out. So everything looks fine. I'm going to export my mesh as, keep the same file name. And this is where MeshLab is pretty useful, because you have tons of different files that you can export as. We're going to look for this STL is the one that we want. I just usually use the defaults on all the questions it asks after that. And now we're ready for the MakerBot desktop software. And this is more free software provided by MakerBot on their website. So here I have my build environment configured for a Z18. That sounded like a lot of technical jargon, but really it's just coming up here to devices and selecting the type of device that you use. We happen to have a Z18, so that way it simulates the build plate, and when I put my shape on here, I'll kind of know how big it is in reference to the build plate, how tall it's going to be. You'll notice on these lines, the Z18 prints out pretty tall, so you can't hardly see them up there, whereas if you were doing a standard replicator or replicator 2 or something like that, your lines would stop about here to give you that visual cue that, oh, my model's too tall and I need to change it in some way to make it fit on the printer. So I'm going to go ahead and add a file. You can actually print, if I had, say, 3 of these things that I made, or I had different ones that were meant to fit together, I could keep adding STL files in here and print multiple things at once, but I'm just going to show just one. I'm going to add a file. I'm going to hit my desktop again and look for my STL here, again in bold black there. Open it. I usually get this when you go through MeshLab. I believe it changes the units of measurement to millimeters instead of inches, so typically your objects come out really small, but MakerBot's used to seeing that, so you can go ahead and rescale and it changes it back to inches. Have a few different buttons on here to kind of configure this. You know this is off center. I'm going to use my move option, and you can put it on platform and center it. Sometimes when you make shapes in Sketchup, they might be floating in the air or something like that when they get here, and this will automatically put it where you want it. These are actually helpful tools because, like rotating it and such, sometimes, like if I were to print this upside down with this top part, that would actually be inefficient because it would have to fill all of this empty space with what's called support material that breaks off. It's real thin plastic that breaks off after you're done. But the printer needs it in order to be able to print in free space. Like if this had huge arms off to the side that just floated, it would need support material underneath, so it would have something to print on when it got to that level. So sometimes looking at your model and flipping it on its side or even flipping it upside down can actually save you a lot of plastic and time. Once you look at it, you can do a couple of print previews. You can preview them, and it takes a while to build. I won't do it here for the video, but you can do previews, and it kind of crunches it down and shows you a layer by layer example and a rough estimate of how much plastic and time it's going to take. But at this point, you're ready to export a print file that you can throw on a USB drive or an SD card, depending on what your 3D printer will accept. The MakerBot Z18, I know, lets you print over the network, so I could connect to a new device, and I know my MakerBot's IP address, and I would just type that in there, and I would connect to it just like I would a standard paper printer over the network and just send my job over to it with the print button. So there's a bunch of options there. That's just a matter of which 3D printer you have and how it works. But at this point, you're ready to go ahead and get it sliced and get it exported to print. I hope that was helpful, and thanks again for watching.